Welcome to Clarity, the show that brings you what you need to know now in the world of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. My name is Shira Rubinoff, and today I'm joined with two very seasoned, well-known CISOs, Stacy Mill and Jonathan Nguyen. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise.
Pleasure. So today we're going to talk about the applicability of AI and the security that surrounds it. And just to give a little color around it, so in order for AI-powered systems to maintain data integrity, operate as it was programmed to do so, and prevent data leaks and misuse, AI security encompasses measures and technologies that are designed to protect AI systems from unauthorized access, manipulation, and malicious attacks. AI-powered systems can detect threats in real time, enabling rapid response and mitigation. And more importantly, AI can evolve and adapt continuously, learning from new data and improving its ability to identify and encounter emerging threats. So now I'm going to turn it over to both of you. I would love to hear from you both what you're seeing as the next big issues in cybersecurity as it relates to AI. Stacy, please.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. And one of the things that I want to try to just partake to people is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We've already dealt with this. And
Yes.
so it's no different than 20 years ago when we were talking about first adopting the internet for not just, for real commerce and for real fund transfers and using that as a backbone, right? So that's the one thing that I see is that people are more afraid of it. And secondly, they think it'll solve everything.
Yeah, well, very well said. And Jonathan, how about you?
So, I think of AI as a progression in our industry. So we start off being blind, and then we bought a lot of instruments to become reactive. We bought so many instruments that we overloaded our teams with alerts, and then we tried to bring in machine learning so we could be proactive. And so now with AI, there's a promise that we go from blind to reactive to proactive to hopefully predictive. And so AI represents the acceleration in terms of detection and mitigation possibilities, but it also poses a couple of real challenges that people have not really considered. The first, I think, is can you really trust that model and the inferences that's being generated?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. And I like the fact that you highlighted that security for AI and AI for security. So let's dive a little deeper. As you both are well seasoned CISOs, have had that roles for many years in many different companies. How do you believe that these issues are shaping the CISO career track? And certainly when it comes to CISO, you wear many, many hats. You're dealing with quite a bit, not just from the organization in terms of stretch career options, dealing with budgets, dealing with teams, how to manage that, whether being proactive, reactive security, and throw in the ability of AI and what it brings to the table. How do you believe that that's shaping the CISO's career track? Jonathan.
Well, I begin with a data point that says for the Fortune 2000, at least 40 to 60% of their revenue is generated by digital experiences. So outside some hard goods, most of everything we do is digitized. In fact, in most cases, about 90% of the revenue. So the way it changes as we go to becoming more proactive and predictive to deliver much more personalized and customized experiences, what we see is the CISO now, not only and his or her team are responsible for not only risk management and compliance, but also the business outcome. And the business outcome is defined by really optimized computing operations. And so what you see now is not only the CISO, but the office of the CISO.
Yes.
And really that responsibility is now bridging over across the network. So the CIO, the CISO, the CFO, working together to define when a material impact has occurred. But in addition to that, being responsible for contextual awareness of not only the operating environment and risk management, but really the user experience and the business outcome as well. So it's a much more broader role with a need to have contextual awareness in terms of both the business side and the risk management side.
No, very interesting. And we talk about that AI, would say, replaces the humans, automation, the extra levels of security it has. And Stacy, we had a conversation about this last week. I'd love to hear your insight on that.
Well, at the state of Kansas, we had to adopt in a world that did not have any capabilities. And that's one of the things I've always looked at any technology as the art of the possible. we have to enable that to make businesses run. So in the early days of NIST, for instance, when we would apply all of the rule sets and all of the STIGs, as they say, the systems wouldn't run, they wouldn't perform. So I love what Jonathan said about that customer experience, because security should be seamless, but it has to always be vigilant. And absolutely, Jonathan, that's what I see as the value of AI, that predictability, that ability to run those logs, to look at those, what I call it noise, and really filter it down. Because as we look at breaches, and in the state of Kansas, during the pandemic, all those systems fell over, by the way. They were old, they were antiquated, and we had to make them hybrid, make them scalable. So we learned scalability about the internet and about, well, it's really just someone else's data center, right? And we focused on that security. But now we've got to go to the edge. The data is where the security lies. But the risks, more than likely, lay at that human layer. So that's what I always like to look at. And never forget that we've also got to educate the users, not only the users, but we've got to think about what third parties, fourth parties, and fifth parties may have that data. So building upon what Jonathan said, it's also that cohesiveness across the organization. That's how the CISO has grown. Not only are we technologists, we have to be business minded, but we also have to be product minded. And the other thing is, we can see, we know what AI means. We know it's a program, we know it's running someone else's data center if we're going to get to quantum. That means we've still got to apply all the layers we had before and the privacy. And remember, at the end, anything generative should be checked if it needs to be foolproof.
Sure. So we talked about trust. We talked about predictability. You talk about automation. We talk about all the areas that AI is helping us, not just advance within the organization, but externally to customers, clients, partners alike. And we talk about, as you both mentioned, and certainly Jonathan, you highlighted the digital transformation across the organization, incentivized together, working together as a whole, right? At the end of the day, we're incentivized to make it run in a very smooth way, not just security, operations, all of it hand in hand. Here's AI, and we're still in the early adaptations of AI on many different levels, and we still haven't seen the global touch of what AI is going to do coming in the future. What do you see and what do you predict that we can see maybe in the next 2 to 3 years utilizing AI across all facets of organizations?
So what I think you'll see dramatic acceleration of innovation in terms of time to market. You'll see really incredible developments in life sciences and pharmaceuticals and healthcare. The ability to proactively decide Jonathan needs to get a checkup, to predictability in terms of this is Jonathan's DNA, this is what the population of people that looks like Jonathan behave like. These are the things that we need to be able to predict in terms of developing the right types of healthcare solutions for Jonathan. All that said, I think the biggest challenge in moving forward is, can you trust that AI model and the inferences being generated by that model at hyperscale in near real time with life and limb issues? And oh, by the way, not only does our customers expect 99.97 levels of confidence intervals and accuracy and real-time performance, 97% of the world's population lives under a privacy regulation today. So we have to be caretakers of other people's intellectual property, their data, to secure that. I think if we do that all and do it right, then we get to realize the promises that we're beginning to just see today.
Sure. No, very well said on that. And Stacy, you were mentioning the different levels of seamlessness in security. And I'd like to touch upon that for a moment. Obviously, we all know when building security products, you don't want to layer upon layer of different security products that's not thinking about security from the get-go. Security needs to be built in. So when we're dealing with AI, we have to think about cybersecurity as a whole. And cybersecurity as it relates to AI, where do you see the biggest challenges that organizations are facing today?
Really in understanding what and how it's being used. So building those large language models and learning, giving you the example at State of Kansas when we started chatbots. No one had ever heard of that. And they thought, I really had directors in front of me saying that it run help desk for years or customer service desk for years saying this will never work. It won't be as precise. And not only was it more precise, but it learned even faster than we even could imagine. And we launched it within days, not months. And long to short, you have to learn. People have to, as they're adopting, they need to understand not only what the frameworks are, who has the data and what are they doing with it, because they have not lost the accountability for that data. Next, the adoption of it has got to be more in the security piece of it. Where's the data? What's the connectivity? Those are the kind of layers. But it also has to be more flexible to be adopted. And that's what I see as we're evolving security into more of the passwordless security, more of the behavioral based security. We can now take great advantage of that with AI. You know, we've seen the advent of the keystroke where I can tell it's Stacy typing. Well, can you imagine when I just come on? Now it's going to be able to know exactly who I am, exactly what I can have access to. But we've got to be able to write the right models and have the right trust, which means we're going to have to learn from this and let it run and let it learn. That's what I think is brilliant about it, and that's what the cutting edge companies are doing. They've spent a few years on it now, and now it's ready. And I cannot wait to see where it will go from here.
Well, Stacy, what about the bias area that people are
Yeah,
worried about when it comes to AI? There's a lot of talk around that. Obviously, there's a human before that.
right,
There's the machine and there's the human.
right.
There's always a human on either end. Yes, we have AI inserted, but how do we deal with the biasness associated with AI?
You know, for me, the bias has to go with the data that's collected
Collected.
because that's what it's learning from. And then the next bias comes from the questions you ask. And so I think that's where we have to, you're going back to where I was saying, and saying it more, even better than I could. We have to train ourselves on how to use it. We have to be able to not be so linear. And that's one of the things I love about it is that it takes a linear capability and scales it out of way to say, what am I not asking you? That's the type of things that when you really have the documentation and you really have all that in the brain, that's what a true leader and what a true, a veteran knows, right? And that's the kind of thing that I think AI will bring to the table because it can go through generations of information and help grow. And that's what we've got to focus is it will grow the bias that we give it. Does that make sense?
No,
So we have to be
definitely
careful
does.
what we feed it.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So, Jonathan, as a CISO, and Stacy, I'd love to hear from you as well. You have organizations and companies coming to you all the time trying to sell you the latest and greatest AI security products that you must have in order to assist your organization run better, faster, stronger, more secure from all different areas within an organization. Tons of companies coming out there, very, very noisy industry. And there's companies popping up all day long, all the time, saying, you can't function without me. You need this because we're proactive, we're reactive, we're proactive and reactive upside down. How and what would you tell the outside organizations and the outside industry as itself? What would be the most important area that CISOs are looking at today in order to be, let's focus on the proactive piece, proactive cybersecurity utilizing AI. What would you be looking for?
It's proactive in two ways. The first approach is I'm looking for more context. I'm not looking for another widget. I'm looking for the better awareness. I want to move from proactive to predictive. I want to move as far left of the detonation as possible. I want to understand behavior. I want to understand indicators of compromise. So I think what you're going to see in the marketplace over the next 12, 18 months is a greater focus on posture management and contextual awareness. So you see that in applications, you see that in networks, you see that on security itself. So posture management. The second aspect is this, the irony of zero trust. So in zero trust, we presume the network has been compromised and the data most likely exfiltrated in many cases. And yet we focus on just the client side. right? So most SASE solutions authenticate the user, but really does nothing for the system of access being requested. It never authenticates that.
Yep.
Interesting.
No.
So I look at a situation where I'm going to protect my data at rest, data in motion, and now data in process using confidential computing techniques. I want to look for solutions that are not quantum resistant as per the latest executive order and those types of algorithms. I want to look for a quantum safe solution. I want to look at QKD. I want to look at the ability to actually demonstrate that even if my data is compromised, like I assume, that it can't be stored and decrypted in the future. So focus on quantum safe versus quantum resistant. So I think those two areas are what I'm looking at, is better awareness, contextual awareness, acceleration of ability to detect and react, and then finally, a better ability to safeguard my resilience side. Yeah.
No, I like that. I like that intentional awareness. I think that's a very key point that we hear quite often now in the industry, to be intentional about what you're trying to do and what you want. And Stacy, would love to hear from you as well, as you certainly are dealing with this quite often in your career.
Well, to build on what Jonathan's saying, we've got to quiet the noise. And we have all of these alerts flying at us all day long. And what's real? Every big breach that has been known, there's been indications, right? And so that's the thing for me, is how can I speed up that time to resolve, that time to detect, so that I have better situational awareness. But secondly, in the cyber world for me with AI, is that the contextuality and the speed at which it can detect, but it still has to run down to a person. I
Yes.
think before I'm not ready to let someone in to my BIOS of my networks and things like that yet. I still, before it cuts, as they say, it cuts the head off, I want to make sure someone knows what's going at it. We've seen that with what we saw with CrowdStrike. Again, there was accountability on both sides there. Where was this, on the other side, the user side, if you will, or the customer side, where was the segmentation? Where was the proper vulnerability management and how you roll things out? But my point is, staying left of them, that's what it's all about. If it doesn't bring that kind of value, then it's going to add to the noise. That's the best thing I see so far with the products that have even a hope of bringing value. They've got to cut the noise. They can't be additional.
No, that's excellent. And you both are giving very much hands-on focus and thoughts around real-world examples that you're dealing with. And I think that our audience really would appreciate that and does appreciate your insight into this. And it's important for the audience also, and I'm sure you both would agree, that there's no one size fits all for every organization. Every organization runs differently, has different models that they're looking at. They have different areas where they need to focus, and every organization is not built the same. Whether it even being financial or healthcare, it's not all the same even in the same sector. And what I love doing on my calls here and on my shows is like to ask my experts about, just to share with the audience, maybe a top cybersecurity focus or something you want to think about, or a hint, or something you'd like to share all around cybersecurity, and interweave it with AI as a final thought. And I'll start with you, Jonathan, please.
Sure. So, my time at Verizon working on the data breach report, 25 years in cybersecurity, looking at a lot of stats. And I think Stacy said it well. We're still looking at 90% of all the major disruptions and breaches could have been mitigated through simple to intermediate controls. Most ransomware are known variations. And so I would say, look, before the shiny bells and whistles, leverage AI so that you can demonstrate, you can address the known knowns. If you can't address the known knowns, we shouldn't be thinking about the known unknowns yet, okay? So focus on basics, getting those intermediate controls down right. After that, when you're worried about ransomware and the board comes to you and says, well, what about this? What about these attacks? If it's a 0 day, it's a 0 day. By definition, you can't really mitigate that. So I always apply the rule of 3-2-2-1-0, which is 3 copies of your data in 2 types of media, 1 off-site, 1 immutable leads to 0 surprises. And the lesson that from NotPetya was the 1 immutable copy. And when you have that 1 immutable copy, make sure you back it up based upon the SLAs of your critical business processes. Do that and get the basics done, and I tell you, you're 90% there. And that, by the way, meets the threshold of a reasonable level of due care in the identification and management of risk.
That's great insight, Jonathan. Thank you. And how about you, Stacy?
I love that, Jonathan. The big thing for me is remember, I've got an E4 strategy. If you're going to evolve an organization, you have to educate yourself and your partners on that risk. You have to educate yourself on the strategy and the structure of your business and make sure the strategy and structure of your security posture meets your business goals. And then lastly, with the tech teams, focus on, if I could get anybody to do this, I'm gonna echo what Jonathan said. Focus on the maintain, manage, and monitor, because that education is where you're going to start to build your strategy, and then enable people before you ever do enforcement.
Yeah.
So remember, to evolve an organization, educate, enable before you come in with an enforcement. To get big things done, you have to provide that value before you ask big things of people. So remember, be a partner, do your best to not only be an advocate for the technology groups and the AI groups, but to be that partner with them to help them bridge into the business, because that's what a good CISO does. Is they're a good bridge and have that conversation. Because remember, half the time it's not our teams that do it. So before you ask of something, make sure you bring that value.
Oh, very well said as well. Well, Stacy and Jonathan, thank you both for joining me here today and sharing your insight and wisdom and experience with our audience today.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Clarity. We're bringing you what you need to know now in the world of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Thank you for joining us today.